In 2015, China sent the evidence of the Nanjing massacre collected from all over the world to UNESCO to be registered as a World Memory Heritage, but was strongly opposed by Japan. Japan completely denied the matter and threatened not to pay the United Nations dues. Under Japan's distorted facts for many years, the Japanese people are completely unaware of this matter. The young people in China are very indifferent to this matter. Even Taiwan province, which has been poisoned by Japan, is going to kiss the Japanese family. What is this? Make people sad? However, no matter how Japan conceals, reverses truth, and falsifies history, it will always change the record that someone was at the scene, and he is Rabi. 1. Rabi saw hell on earth. Today's Nanjing is the modern version of Dante's Divine Comedy. Blood and rape are the key words of this chapter. Today there are large-scale massacres and thousands of rape cases, atrocities, lust, and all kinds of the brutality seemed endless. At first I tried my best to be friendly to the Japanese so as not to annoy them, but then my smile faded and my eyes became as indifferent as theirs. Rabi's Diary. December 14, 1937 Our car passed about 100 meters and we saw a corpse. I got out of the car and checked. The bullet holes in these corpses were all punched from behind, which means that they were probably shot to death when the people were fleeing. December 14, 1937 At noon, Japanese soldiers broke into a house in Kinyan Lane, forcibly dragged away 4 girls, and raped them. December 15, 1937 Japanese soldiers broke into the house of a Chinese resident on Hankow Road, raped a young woman, and forcibly dragged away 3 women. The husbands of 2 of the women chased after the Japanese soldiers, and the 2 men were shot dead by the Japanese soldiers. December 15, 1937 At night, 7 Japanese soldiers broke into the library building of Jinling University and dragged away 7 Chinese women, 3 of whom were raped on the spot. December 18, 1937 450 women fled to our building for protection and spent the night in the open air in our compound. Many of them had been raped by Japanese soldiers. December 22, 1937 When clearing the safety zone, I saw many corpses of civilians piled up in the pond. There were more than 30 corpses in one place at most. These corpses had their hands tied and stones around their necks. January 1, 1938 When I walked into a room, I saw a Japanese soldier lying naked on top of a desperate crying girl, and I hurriedly shouted at the Japanese soldier. When he saw me, he took his pants and ran away. Countless girls in Nanjing were ravaged by Japanese beast soldiers, and they died without dignity. The Chinese people should always remember these humiliations. Japanese soldiers once treated Chinese people like livestock. 2. They are killing people in a race. Rabi, born in Hamburg, Germany, went to China in 1908, joined Siemens AG in 1911, and successively did business in Beijing, Tianjin, Nanjing and other places. After arriving in Nanjing, I saw Japanese soldiers killing people while flying leaflets from airplanes. The leaflets floating all over the sky brazenly wrote, "Japanese soldiers are your trustworthy friends." Rabi said, "I have seen the shamelessness of the Japanese." Rabi did not choose to leave Nanjing because he wanted to maintain the operation of Siemens AG, and he could not bear to abandon the employees, servants, and their families of the foreign firm at such a moment. When Fritz, the newly appointed general manager of Siemens China, asked Rabi, "You do so much, just for the Chinese?" His answer was for Siemens. Until one day, when he saw such a scene, he felt that he could not just do something for the business of his own company, but for the Chinese, because the Japanese had lost their humanity, and their actions were a disgrace to the entire human race. One day, Rabi came out but did not see his driver. The Japanese sent him to a prisoner of war camp on the grounds that his driver was Chinese. Rabi hurried to find him, and saw his driver killed through the crack of the door. In this yard, there are 2 senior Japanese devils competing to kill. They chopped off the heads of the Chinese people and lined them up, and even kicked them around on the ground like footballs. The 2 laughed heartily and joked about it, saying that killing Chinese people is more enjoyable than killing pigs. And these tragedies, outsiders don't know yet. The radio station was severely damaged yesterday, and the broadcast cable of the city station was also broken. In this way, the Japanese achieved their goal, the central radio station in Nanjing was temporarily bombed into silence. 3. The Chinese removed radio. At 4 p.m. on September 26, the Japanese army blew up another 12 Chinese houses, killing a total of 30 people. 15 bombs were dropped in the central hospital. It is still unknown how many people were killed or injured. All the devastation was photographed by foreign correspondents and reporters and will surely be seen again to let the world know what the Japanese beasts have done. Last night, Engineer Joe from the Shanghai headquarters of Siemens Matheson came to me after a 26-hour train journey. He came here on a business trip to repair the multiple telephone equipment at the suggestion of Mr. Tao, an official from the Ministry of Communications. Mr. Joe is our best engineer. During the conversation, I asked him whether his family was at ease with him coming here alone, and whether he was worried that he would be killed by the Japanese. The answer he gave me was very touching. He replied, "I told my wife, in case I encounter misfortune, you should not count on Siemens, never make any demands on Siemens, you have to go back to your hometown in the north and rely on it with your children. Our own Susukeda makes a living. My trip is not for the benefit of the foreign company, but first of all for the benefit of my country." This moved me very much. Under normal circumstances, every Chinese cannot be expected to have this kind of spirit, but Mr. Joe's remarks prove the existence of this kind of spirit. As long as there are more and more people like this for the benefit of the motherland for the sake of existence, the Chinese will definitely drive away the Japanese soldiers. Japan is not only guilty of many crimes in China, but also in Asia. The Chinese resisted the most and were massacred the most. The despicable and shameless nature of the Japanese will never be changed. This account cannot be settled now. The descendants of China children and grandchildren will definitely count. 4. The Japanese attack with poison gas. Many people are talking about the use of poison gas by the Japanese. A newspaper article here proves that the hospital here has confirmed that it has received Chinese soldiers who were poisoned by poison gas. The poor people in Nanjing do not have gas masks to use at all. Another 40 people were killed in the bombing yesterday. Rabi called Japan, hoping to agree to the establishment of a civilian protection zone led by him, but did not get a reply. Considering that Germany and Japan are allies, they sent a telegram through the German Consulate General in Shanghai, hoping that the German head of state would intervene in this matter. Hitler once wrote in the book Mein Kampf, "The Japanese nation has never created culture. It is a shame to ally with this kind of country. The Japanese are all fools. They are only worthy of fishing on the seashore," said to his Secretary General, Armstrong. However, Hitler was indifferent to Rabi's suggestion to let Germany intervene in Japan's atrocities in China. Afterwards, he ordered Germany to be banned from discussing the Nanjing massacre. Like the shamelessness of the Japanese, even Hu Lanjing, a traitor who has no bottom line, despises it. He said, "The characteristic of the Japanese nation is that there is no introspection. Because introspection is possible only with a theoretical and systematic way of thinking, otherwise it is only a religious confession. And Japan's Shinto does not degenerate into religion, so the Japanese don't even repent. Japanese culture is generally dark, without the grand weapon of Confucian culture, only the cruelty and aggressiveness of the small island nation, which will never change." 5. Massacre of civilians. At noon, the radio broadcast said that if General Tang did not withdraw his troops immediately, the Japanese would launch a large-scale attack on Nanjing tomorrow. The city was bombed all day today, the windows were rattling. This bloody massacre must be devastating. At 8 o'clock in the evening on December 12, violent shelling. The flames reddened the entire southern sky. Refugees in the yard squeezed all the way to the edge of the air raid shelter. Someone was banging on the 2 courtyard doors, and women and children begged us to let them in. Some daring men climbed over the courtyard wall from behind the German school and tried to enter my courtyard for protection. I couldn't bear to listen to this kind of begging, so I opened the 2 doors and let in everyone who wanted to come in. Beginning on the 13th, Japanese soldiers began to massacre civilians in the city. More than 190,000 people were massacred and burned with machine guns by the Japanese army. In addition, there were sporadic massacres, and more than 150,000 corpses were buried by charitable organizations. The total number of victims was more than 300,000. Corpses are strewn all over the place, it is horrific. Its cruel situation is beyond the description of Penchu. I can only organize international friends to transfer the fleeing Chinese to a safe area. At least here, the Japanese dare not invade. As I write this, the sound of Japanese soldiers banging on the door sounded in the backyard. Seeing that the servant did not open the door, a few Japanese soldiers poked their heads around the courtyard wall, and when they saw me walking past with a flashlight on, they ran away immediately. In my yard, many women and children cling to each other silently with staring, panic-stricken eyes, partly for mutual warmth and partly for mutual courage. The hope of all of them is that I, a foreign devil, can drive away the evil spirits. 6. The atrocities against women and children are appalling. Yesterday, 1,000 women fled to Jinling University because they were raped or their homes were robbed. The officers of the Japanese squad ordered the 2 female leaders of Jinling Women's College of Arts and Sciences, Miss Minnie Wudeling and Miss Chen, and their girlfriends to Mrs. Venom walked out of the gate, and Japanese soldiers pushed and rubbed them in the cold. The Japanese military officer insisted that there were Chinese soldiers in the school and they must be searched out and executed. Japanese soldiers raped multiple women in a seminary, a hall full of refugees, women, children, and men. Seeing what Mr. Raby wrote here, let me add another sentence. Today's female college students are influenced by Japanese culture and European and American culture, and they practice female boxing all day long, especially those who major in liberal arts and journalism. Raby's Diary and Zhang Chunro's Nanjing Massacre, you worship foreigners and learn from the West to practice female boxing and LGBT garbage. Think about it, once the country weakens, your fate will be the fate of these women in the Nanjing Massacre. Without dignity, the Japanese devils will not give you women's rights. In front of the invaders, women's rights are only within the range of the country's cannons. Mr. Raby continued to write, every night, young women are snatched away, and the Japanese use trucks to take them away. The cries of women and children are heard day and night. The situation here has reached the point where words cannot describe. We don't know how to protect these people. The Japanese soldiers had completely lost control. It is estimated that the Europeans will not be able to stop the bestiality of Japanese animals. 7 Japanese atrocities in the safe zone. The safe zone is where foreigners are located, and it is also a temporary shelter for refugees, but crazy Japanese soldiers have repeatedly come to the safe zone to make trouble. This kind of mad dog-like thing is too scary. On December 20th, at 1930, a 17-year-old woman who was 9 months pregnant was raped by 2 Japanese soldiers. At 2100 hours, she was in labor pains. The baby was born at midnight and the teenage girl was taken to hospital only this morning because people were afraid to go out into the streets at night. The baby is doing well and the mother is already in hysterics. Recorded by Dr. Wilson. On December 20th, Japanese soldiers broke into the house of our committee members Mr. Schulshir and Mr. Pondang, which is now shared by Reverend Maggie, Mr. Podshibaro, and Mr. Zaire. Japanese soldiers broke into the house in front of Mr. Maggie. Many women were raped in front of all the Chinese friends received by the pastor. At 5 p.m. on December 21st, Japanese soldiers robbed many luggage belonging to foreigners in the refugee shelter of the Bible Teacher Training School. Japanese soldiers broke into our houses day and night, molested or humiliated women, and took anything they saw. Not only the residences of Chinese people, but also the houses that Americans live in. A Japanese truck came and took away 15 coolies from my Siemens shelter. It is said that they were going to work in the Zaiquan power plant. The coolies left with great reluctance. In spite of all the corresponding promises made by the Japanese, the last time the food provided to them was poor or not eaten at all. 8. The Japanese are mean and ugly. In Raby's mind, there is no difference between Japanese soldiers and Japanese people. If soldiers of this kind can be raised to attack unarmed and non-resisting civilians, all Japanese must be despicable and ugly. During the period of violence by Japanese soldiers, Raby and more than a dozen international friends jointly initiated the establishment of the Nanjing Safety Zone and served as the chairman of the International Committee of the Safety Zone. The 3.86 square kilometer safety zone provided shelter for about 250,000 Chinese civilians, and more than 600 people were also protected in his own house and small garden. It was this choice that made Raby witness the bloody catastrophe that took place on the land of China, and also rewrote his life. Japan communicated with the Nazi German head of state, saying that Nanjing had returned to normal order, and asked Raby to leave Nanjing. In April 1938, Raby and his party were forcibly repatriated by the Japanese. On the way to the port, someone followed them all the way to prevent Raby, and the media talked nonsense, but the Japanese themselves were full of nonsense in front of the media, and attributed to them the credit for protecting the citizens of Nanjing in the safe zone. He also said that they were helping the people of Nanjing as soon as they entered the city. Such words can only be said by the despicable and ugly Japanese. In April 1938, after returning to Germany, Raby submitted a written report to the German authorities, continuing to expose the crimes committed by the Japanese army in Nanjing. He spent a year carefully sorting out his diary and related materials, and left these historical records to future generations in China. He hoped that the younger generation in China would remember history and not let his grandchildren suffer from the sufferings of their ancestors again. As long as the enemy is forgotten, future generations will inevitably suffer. Raby died on January 5, 1950, and the diary was not released to the world until December 12, 1996 by his granddaughter Ursula Reinhardt in New York. 9. Raby's later years. In 1945, World War II was won, but the German fascists and Japanese beasts ended in failure. But Raby was arrested by the Soviet Union and the United Kingdom because of his identity as a Nazi party and put in prison. Fortunately, a year later, the court confirmed that although Raby was a Nazi, he had done nothing bad and was acquitted. However, Raby was penniless at this time, and the 60-year-old man lived without food every day. In order to fill his stomach, he had to work as a porter, working more than 10 hours a day, while suffering from high blood pressure and diabetes. When Raby was in trouble, the citizens of Nanjing who were thousands of miles away heard the news and immediately launched a fundraiser. They raised a sum of money, converted it into $2,000 at the market price, and sent it to Raby. The Nanjing government stated that it would provide Raby with housing and pensions, and welcome his family to settle in Nanjing. However, Raby rejected the invitation. He said that he liked China very much, but he still wanted to stay in his homeland to spend his later years. Raby died on January 5, 1950. In 2005, China provided 1.05 million funds to reshape the tombstone for Raby. Raby was luckier than Schindler. Schindler saved many Jews. In his later years, Schindler returned to Germany and died of poverty, illness, hunger, and cold. Maybe the ideas are different. The Chinese think that Raby, the benefactor, is my God. He saved me, and I want to repay God, while the Jews think that God sent Schindler to save them and take care of Schindler's life. God is in charge. Conclusion. Why no one keeps saying don't let go of Germany, why you always don't let go of Japan. The two countries have completely different views on aggression. Germany and the Nazis have made a complete cut, and no occasion is allowed to praise the Nazis or Hitler, otherwise, was a crime and sentenced to 3 years to start. However, Japan not only does not recognize the history of the massacre, but instead considers the massacre to be an honor. The war criminals in our eyes are, in their eyes, national heroes in their eyes. Japan is still teaching militarism in schools, and is planning to do it again. Launch a war of aggression against China. The famous Japanese historian Jun Naosuke admitted in his famous Japanese political history that since the Meiji Restoration, all Japanese have participated in the aggression against China. When the time came when the Japanese government decided to start aggression, both militarists and ordinary people were overjoyed, welcomed the government's decision, and longed to become the accomplices of aggression. The Japanese have never regretted their aggression against China and Asia. They never sympathized with the victims they slaughtered. Their only sadness is the 2 atomic bombs they were dropped on, as if the whole world is Japan is the biggest victim. China does not need an apology from Japan, because the Chinese people do not accept an apology. A true and sincere apology can only be made when Japan is wiped out, otherwise it is all lies and deceit.